All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show with a little 49er video. As are the Niners looking for a new wide receiver? We'll talk about that story coming up next. But first, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. Great food, great brisket, great brisket chili. The barbecue chicken, the pulled pork. It's all amazing. Damon and Mary have a great restaurant. Check them out. Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. We're also brought to you by Sharp Corners and Claudaddy Arcades, and we'll talk about them in a bit. But first, let's get right to it. The story of the morning, Diana Rossini is reporting from The Athletic that the 49ers, the Jets, and the Vikings are all interested in additional wide receiver help. And, you know, it makes sense for the 49ers, and we'll get into a few names of who potentially could be on this list of list that the Niners may be kicking tires on via the trade. You know, when you think about the 49ers, you know, you think about their wide receiver core, it makes you want to take a gander, if you will, at their depth chart. So here it is. This is their depth chart at wide receiver. So you have Brandon Ayuk, and he's a great player, but he's probably not going to be back until November. Then you have Jauan Jennings, who's also a terrific player, but he's holding out, holding in, got a calf injury, whatever. Don't know what the deal is there, but there's drama. And there's also reason to believe that he won't be able to give you much in September now because he hasn't practiced all summer. So, you know, if you don't practice, you're, you know, subject potentially to, you know, soft tissue injuries. Soft tissue injuries could easily take you out for September. So even if he shows up, the odds of him having some soft tissue injury that takes him out of action early is pretty high, I would say. So you can't really bank on JJ. You can't bank on Ayuk. You can't bank in September on Demarcus Robinson because he's got a 3-game suspension looming from the league for violating the conduct policy. I don't know if you can depend on Jordan Watkins. He's a rookie, and he had a high ankle sprain about 3 weeks ago, and usually that's a month-long thing. He'll be rounding into form right about week 1, but he hasn't played a lot this summer. You have Jacob Cowing, who was your 4th-round pick last year, and I don't know if he's going to make the roster or not, but he hasn't done anything. He hasn't played in any preseason games. He's barely participated in any practices. Just yesterday, I thought it was the first time I actually saw him go full. To me, it seemed like he was on kind of a 3/4 mode until yesterday. Yesterday was the first time that I think I really saw Cowing run full speed. So, you know, we're talking about late August. Then there's the veteran Russell Gage. There's the veteran Robbie Chosen, the veteran Isaiah Hodgins. And then you got just guys. I mean, Junior Bergen doesn't look like much to me as a receiver. Malik Turner, Tariq Owens, they're not NFL receivers. So you don't have a whole lot. So, I mean, really, what can you depend on? You can depend on Ricky Pearsall and what? Then immediately you're at Russell Gage, Robbie Chosen, Isaiah Hodgins, and now you're talking about 4 receivers. You can't bank on the speedsters, Cowing and Watkins yet because of health. You can't bank on Ayuk yet or JJ because of injury. He's putting an awful lot on Ricky Pearsall's plate and just saying, Ricky, carry us. Kittle, carry us somehow. So the Niners need another receiver. There's no question about it. I mean, anybody who looks at this depth chart can see that you got a lot of names here. You got 12 receivers here. But how many are really NFL that are healthy and available week 1? Hodgins, Chosen, Gage, Pearsall. You only have 4 of your 12 that are healthy and ready to roll week 1. Maybe 5 if you want to throw Jauan Jennings in there, but he hasn't practiced. So, you know, and yesterday he was walking around the field doing stretching, you know, and once again, I don't know what's worse news. People were like, hey, don't worry. It's not a holdout. It's not a hold in. It's a calf injury. Like, that's good news. This guy had a calf injury in the spring. It's August. If he still has a calf injury now, I think there's reason to believe that he's not going to have that great of a year. He had a serious, legitimate calf injury from March, April, May, June, July, August. We're creeping up on September. He's been out with a a calf injury for 7 months, but now he's going to strap it up and play week 1, and he's going to have a full year, and he's going to be great. It's like, that makes no sense. That absolutely makes no sense if the calf injury is legit. And we'll take him at his word that it is. So to me, that's worse news than the contract. The contract is just a matter of, hey, will they pay you more? Will they, won't they? Whatever. The calf injury means you've had a calf injury for 7 months and you haven't been playing football every day. What's going to happen when you are playing football every day? So, the idea that he wants an extension, the Niners would have to be crazy to give a guy with a legitimate calf injury for 7 months, who's already played his best football, an extension when he already has a deal and he's a free agent at the end of the year. No. Let him become a free agent at the end of the year. Dangle the carrot, motivation. Don't pay everybody and take away their motivation. Plus, if the Niners do pay JJ, aren't the offensive linemen going to be like, hey, what the hell? What about Colton? What about our guy? He's over here doing the good deed, fighting, clawing, scrapping in the hot summer sun in Santa Clara while JJ's inside stretching his calf, and you're going to reward JJ, but you're not going to reward McKivitz, who's been out there blood, sweat, and tears all summer. I think that would probably be a move that would get some negative pushback in that locker room. As much as they love JJ, JJ and McKivitz are in the same spot. They're good key cogs in the wheel on a team that has high expectations. Both those guys are free agents at the end of the year. You can't take care of one and not the other and not have some kind of pushback from the guys in that room. All right, let's talk wide receivers. What's realistic? What's not realistic? Okay, Terry McLaurin. I don't think that's realistic. I don't think the Niners are – you think the Niners – people saying the Niners can't trade for Trey Hendrickson because they can't have two $30 million defensive ends. Well, if you can't have two $30 million defensive ends, you can't have two super expensive diva wide receivers. That's for sure. So McLaurin, no, too expensive. It's not going to happen. Tyreek Hill, too expensive. Not going to happen. So take those names and just scratch them out. Those aren't realistic names. But let's go through some names that maybe are more realistic. The number one name on my list is Romeo Dobbs. Now, some people are saying, isn't Dobbs going to get cut? Other people are saying, no way he's going to get cut. I would be in the camp that says no way he's going to get cut, just because he's too established and there's too many teams that need a receiver. But Romeo Dobbs, a free agent at the end of the year, probably going to cost you a 4th or 5th round pick to get him from Green Bay. Probably cost the Niners a higher round pick than other teams because they're the Niners. That's just the reality of doing business in the conference with a rival like Green Bay. But Green Bay did pick up Isaiah Nayer. They do have an incredibly loaded wide receiver room. And the talk is they want to save some money on the cap. They drafted Golden. They've drafted Savion Williams. They have younger receivers. They're trying to kind of push to the front of the line. And you got Romeo Dobbs sitting there at the top of the front of the line going, hey, what about me, man? I've been doing all the producing here. I've been kind of the guy up in this beast. What about me? So, Dobbs, I think, is going to get dealt. And I think the 49ers ought to be first in line. He went to Nevada. He's had a little fit of drops from time to time, but he's also a really solid receiver with good size, speed, playmaking ability, versatility. I think in a lot of ways, Romeo Dobbs is still going to play his best football coming up. I think he's been pretty good. And I think for the Niners, it makes sense because, this guy went to Nevada. He's a Western guy. Maybe he'd be willing to sign here for, an extension and be a Niner for the next few years. So maybe, a guy like that would be the top name on my list, Romeo Dobbs. If you could get Romeo Dobbs, I think he would fit in really nicely with the young speed that you have, with some of the other receivers that you have. I think Dobbs would be absolutely perfect. I think Purdy to Dobbs would be a beautiful thing to watch. All right, so he's the guy, probably the biggest name wide receiver that's not named Tyreek Hill or Terry McLaurin. It doesn't have a burdensome contract that is out there in the trade market. But there are other guys that potentially could be out there that would make a lot of sense. Let's go through that list. Now, free agent-wise, the Niners have had their look, right? They brought in Gabe Davis, didn't sign him. I would imagine they've thought about Amari Cooper, Nelson Aguilar, maybe Kadarius Toney, and some of the other free agents, and they haven't moved on those guys. So obviously there's not a lot of interest in the free agent market on those receivers. Let's talk about some other receivers who potentially could be available. Now, there's a lot of talk the Jets want to add a receiver, but there's also a lot of talk that the Jets have a couple receivers that they're willing to part ways with, and that would be the veterans Alan Lazard and the second-year receiver Malachi Corley. Why Corley? I don't think Lazard is a great fit for the Niners, but I think Corley might be. He's a lot like Deebo Samuel. He can run a lot of the same routes that Deebo ran. He was drafted by Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh in the 3rd round in last year's draft when they were running the New York Jets. So now here he is a year later. He's getting caught up in a numbers game with the Jets. They got a lot of different receivers there. They're looking to add receivers, and Corley is just there. 2nd-year receiver, 3rd round pick. Probably you could get him for a 7th round pick, something like that, a late round pick, 6th or 7th round pick. I think that's the kind of trade that Lynch has made in the past for, the Jordan Willises of the world. And I think that's what he's probably looking to do here. Probably not invest a high pick, but more like a late day 3 pick. So who could be fetched for a late day 3 pick? Malachi Corley. Now, he's not, an awesome route runner, and he's still a young receiver and needs some route refinement. But as far as run after the catch, this is a guy who would be very interesting. Very interesting. Houston has a bunch of receivers, and I would imagine Christian Kirk is very available. Now, he also maybe has a burdensome contract, so that has to be investigated a little bit, but I think Kirk is totally gettable. Tennessee, a young team with young receivers coming up. Guys like Xavier Restrepo and Alec Amanor, looking to kind of assert, a new era with Cam Ward. Would they move Calvin Ridley? Calvin Ridley is a difference-making receiver. He had the gambling situation suspension, but he's back now, and Ridley would be a fantastic get for the 49ers. Indianapolis, there's a lot of talk in Indy that they're going with Daniel Jones because this is the team that had Peyton Manning, and the rumor of the morning is that the Colts and Chris Ballard could be angling for Arch Manning. And if that's the case, maybe they would trade one of their veteran receivers. They have Alec Pierce, and Pierce has got good hands and is a young receiver who maybe could be had for a late day 3 pick. I don't think the Raiders are going anywhere. And they have Jacoby Myers, and I don't think Myers dropped a single ball last year. Myers is kind of wasted away on a Raider team that wants to run the heck out of it, and then now has Dante Thornton and Jack Betch, young receivers that they want to kind of work in. And they have some depth at receiver. Jacoby Myers would be a great get for the 49ers. How about Carolina with Adam Thielen? Now, to me, that one, he's older. I'm not as excited about that. How about New England with Kendrick Bourne? Also not excited about that, but I think Kendrick Bourne is definitely available. And then I'll throw you a couple more names. Miami's got a loaded receiver room. They have a young receiver that runs out of the slot there named Malik Washington, who I really like. Always liked him at Virginia. He's just productive. He's a productive receiver anywhere he goes. He's small, but he's productive. The New York Giants, they have Jackson Dart. They have some young receivers coming up. Obviously, Malik Neighbors. Jalen Hyatt was a deep threat. They drafted out of Tennessee a couple years ago, and he just didn't really ever, fulfill his potential. But he still runs well. He's still in their camp. He has shown some glimpses. Heck, he'd probably fit in well in the room with JJ. They both went to Tennessee. But Jalen Hyatt is a name to consider. I think he's a young receiver who's definitely available as we approach the cut down. And I'll give you one more, and I don't know if Adam Peters and the Niners would hook up on a deal. But, the bloom is off the Luke McCaffrey rose. There's a lot of people that really liked Luke McCaffrey a year ago. And now this year, I've heard the reports coming out of Washington's camp that, you know what, not so much. We like him, but we like other guys. And if McCaffrey is being caught up in a numbers game, I think Washington makes some sense. All right, one other thought here that I want to share with you guys. The odds are out on where Brian Robinson could be going next. And this is interesting because when you see the odds, you'll see where the Niners sit in the odds. Here they are right here. These are the odds for Brian Robinson's next team. The Niners are favored. They're at the top of the list, 4-1. Washington Commanders running back. Maybe you could make some kind of a deal with the Commanders where you got Brian Robinson and Luke McCaffrey. That is the kind of haul that I think if I were the 49ers, I'd be very, very interested in. Brian Robinson is a horse. You know, let's be honest about this. If the 49ers are ever going to get the 6th Lombardi, they're going to have to get to Super Bowl Sunday in the playoffs with a healthy Christian McCaffrey. What does that mean? That means that RB2 on the 49ers is absolutely essential. This isn't 2 years ago. You're not going to be able to just ride McCaffrey left and right all season long and have him just carry you all the way through. It's not going to happen this year. Garendo's a nice gadget piece. These other backs are really nice. Change of pace, future backs. They're both hurt right now, Jordan James and Corey Kiner. The Niners need a better RB2. They need somebody to take the load off of McCaffrey. They need a big back that can run between the tackles 10 to 12 to 15 times a game, who can run it on the goal line, who can take some big-time hits, who can take some of that physical abuse off of Christian. And Brian Robinson's perfect. And seeing the Niners there at 4-1 is exciting. If I could make a trade and I got Brian Robinson and Luke McCaffrey, and I could solve my wide receiver depth issue, add a player that I like potentially long-term in McCaffrey, and add a powerhouse back like Brian Robinson, I would be all about that. So there you go. There's kind of a breakdown on the story of the day. Diana Rossini reporting the 49ers, Jets, and Vikings are all in the market for wide receivers. Why the Vikings interested? Well, Jordan Addison has a suspension, and I think there's a hamstring pull from Justin Jefferson. The Jets are just in a constant rebuild mode. Two other guys that I could see the 49ers, trading for who are not established, who are rookies, but they've had really good camps. And basically you would trade like a 7th round pick just to jump the line, to try to pick these guys. Instead of trying to pick these guys off waivers, jump the line and see if you can get a rookie receiver that you had a good grade on in the draft for like a 7th round pick. The two names that make a lot of sense are two guys that I think are really good, but aren't going to make their respective teams. Mario Williams of the Rams, who played at USC, finished up at Tulane, did nothing but score touchdowns throughout his college career. Sure enough, the other day in the game against the Chargers, Stetson Bennett threw for 3 bills, and he went up top for a 38-yard score to Mario Williams. He also had another catch in that game. Williams is a playmaker, and the projections I see, he's not going to make the Rams roster, but he is really good. And he's the kind of guy that looks like he's ready to contribute right now, even though he's a rookie. So I would give a 7th round pick to the Rams if I could get Mario Williams off their books. And the other guy is Elijah Badger from Kansas City. He's a Sacramento kid. Folsom High, ran 4.4, started at ASU, finished at Florida, just like Ricky Pearsall. Great hands, only 2 drops, very versatile, 4.4 speed. Not going to make Kansas City's roster. To me, he's a perfect sleeper receiver. And there's no doubt I would call Brett Veach right now and say, hey, you want a 7th round pick? Send me Elijah Badger, and we'll take him off your hands. So there you go. The Niners in the market for a receiver. And Diana Rossini says the Niners are there with the Jets and the Vikings. We'll see if they get it done. To me, the number one name on the list has got to be Romeo Dobbs. And I think Dobbs would be a fantastic addition to the Niner wide receiver core. So love to see Lynch get it done. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krug Show. Also, we're brought to you by Sharp Corners Sports Cards and Collectibles. They're at 205 Cypress Avenue in Pacific Grove, California, on the Monterey Peninsula. Anthony Catania's at 831-521-5264. And we're brought to you by Claw Daddy Arcades. They're a great follow on Instagram at Claw_Daddy_Arcades to find a location near you, with locations opening later on this year in Capitola Mall and Visalia Mall down in the Central Valley for Visalia Mall, down the South Bay for Capitola Mall. And thanks to all of you guys for supporting The Krug Show on YouTube,